Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Just give a few moments for people to join, have their audio on. Great to see you all. Can see some familiar faces. I've been meeting in country awareness meetings around the place. So it's great to have you here. Super. So I think with that we'll make a start. I think we're expecting a few more people, but we can get cracking. We've got a long meeting, so we'll start, and a few more people might join us as we come. So good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha Musoke, the IFR for MPO Project Director for Humentum, dialing in from UK, although I normally live in Uganda. You're warmly welcome as participants representing a range of stakeholder groups from across Central Asia and Eastern Europe. So this meeting is part of a series of regional events that we've been holding to promote engagement with the consultation paper. I'm joined by my colleague Karen Sanderson, who's the IFR for MPO Project Director at CIPFA, who'll be taking us through the majority of our time together today. Please do take this opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat of Zoom with your name, your organization, and your country. It would be great for others in the room to know who's here, so we have a sense of who we're joined by. So your name, your organization, and your country in the chat, that would be very helpful. You might notice we have the option for a live transcript running along the bottom, which we hope will be useful if you're hard of hearing or if English isn't your first language. So you can turn those off and on in the Zoom program. If you're having trouble with that, just reach out in the chat and we will try to help you. But that's what that's for. So on the screen here, you can see our agenda for today. We're all in different time zones a bit. So 00 is just the start time of the meeting in whatever time zone you're in. You can see it's quite long, 3+ hours. We do have a lot to get through, so we will just keep moving fairly swiftly through to respect your time. If you have any comments or questions, please use the chat function and we'll do our best to answer these in the session, or we can follow up after the meeting. We hope you're looking forward to sharing your thoughts in the times that we've set aside for the breakout groups and feedback. And you can see there's 3 topics that are set out there. And in each of those topics, we'll be breaking into smaller groups and having a conversation. And we're looking forward to hearing your input. Today's discussion is intended to help you better understand the consultation paper, and for us as a project team to hear your thoughts. But it doesn't constitute a formal response to the consultation. And we would strongly encourage you to submit your own response separately, and we'll tell you how to do that later. So let me start with a brief project overview to set the scene and bring us all on the same page. So in March this year, the EU Commissioner, Janez Lenarčič, created something of a stir when he said that the biggest barrier to localization is the administrative capacity of local actors when it comes to accountability, transparency, and sound financial management. He implied that the reason that the EU and other donors don't give directly to non-profit organizations operating in countries where funds are needed is because of concerns about capacity and financial transparency. But I think capacity is only one side of the story. It's also about having an agreed standard to aim for and work towards, an internationally accepted definition of what good financial transparency looks like. So non-profit financial reporting standards do exist in a few countries, national standards, where they define and harmonize accountability and transparency, and they have a huge impact on public confidence and the sector's credibility. But most countries lack sector-specific standards. And I'm guessing, I think most of the countries that we have here with us today, you don't have a national standard for how nonprofits report. So international financial reporting standards, which are developed with input from all stakeholders, are a really important way to create a level playing field. I think it can be easy to think about this IFR for NPO project as a technical accounting initiative, but its aims should really be seen in the context of localization, of decolonization, and shifting the power in our sector. So I am truly excited that Humentum and CIPFA are at the center of this work. I appreciate these are long meetings and that the consultation paper isn't necessarily bedtime reading. If you work in a non-profit organization or for a donor, then responding to accounting consultation definitely isn't in your job description. But I really, really want to thank you for being here, and your engagement and participation is really, really important so that other people don't make decisions that would affect you without your input. So on this slide here, you can see the project's theory of change, if you like, in a nutshell. Some of the current challenges experienced by nonprofit organizations, by funders, by auditors and regulators stem from this fact that there is no internationally agreed standard for nonprofit organization financial reporting. So this results in inconsistency within and between countries. It results in duplication, producing lots and lots of reports for different users. It creates a burden on preparers and users, and that is produces high costs. So we have inefficiency and ineffectiveness in the financial reporting system. So a focus also by donors, when they focus on project-based reporting or reporting just on one grant, rather than looking at the entity as a whole, when we think about entity of the accountability of the organization as a whole, that focus on project reporting actually makes things like double funding fraud harder to identify. So fundamentally, the system that we have at the moment is not helping to build trust and credibility in the sector, and it creates barriers to funding. So it's our hope that once the guidance we're developing is widely adopted by different jurisdictions and endorsed as best practice by donors, it will help to build a more resilient and accountable sector. It will level the playing field for access to funding and bring more equity too. So the project is being led by Humentum and CIPFA. Maybe we can see that on the screen. And both of us are non-profit organizations ourselves. So this project is by the sector, for the sector. There's no one person who's influencing it in a particular direction. It's really the sector coming together to provide something for the sector as a whole. To help us, we have a practitioner advisory group, we call it the PAG, drawn from different parts of the globe who have different roles within the sector. And very importantly, we have a technical advisory group drawn from the accounting standard setting community to give it technical rigor and real credibility as well. Then the project is overseen by a small steering group. Now, all of these wonderful members work on a voluntary basis, and more information is available on the website. Today, I'd like to recognize that we have with us, I think, Karina Vartanova, who's on our practitioner advisory group. And I think we also have our country champion in Turkey, Alpa Aslan, is with us, and our country champion in Russia, Pavel. So thank you so much for being with us. We really, really appreciate your contribution and support to the project. We couldn't do it without you. In terms of how the project is being delivered, we are doing it in 3 phases, which is consistent with the processes used in setting all international accounting standards. We've just completed the first phase, with the publication of the consultation paper at the end of January. We're now moving into the development phase, and these meetings that we're having now with you will provide important input to the project's next steps. Our timetable for the rest of the project will depend on the amount and nature of the feedback to the consultation paper, but we're working towards a draft of the guidance for consultation in 2023, with final guidance being issued in 2025. So you can see from the snapshots on the screen, I think it's coming. There's a map showing where we have engagement with people from different countries, and we've really made fantastic progress in raising awareness and engaging stakeholders all over the world, including international and local nonprofit organizations, regulators of the sector, donors and funders, auditors, and the accounting community. I should mention that in addition to the PAG and the TAG, we're also supported by country champions. So you can see here have with the black flags, who help to raise awareness of the project in their countries and help us with engagement with stakeholders in different country and language contexts. And Alpa and Pavel fall into that wonderful category of being country champions. If there are any others here as well, I haven't seen, but please do put in the chat if you're a country champion as well. We also have a donor reference group. Donors are obviously such influential players, stakeholders in this whole arena. So we want to make sure that they are at the table in this conversation. So far, the group includes the World Bank, USAID, the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office in the UK, and some major foundations so far. So with that brief introduction that I hope has just brought us roughly to the same place in terms of understanding the project, I'd like to hand over to Karen Sanderson from SIPFA, who will take us through an introduction to the consultation paper and our topics today. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Sam, and hello, everybody. Apologies that the slides are running a bit slow. That's one of the risks of these online events, that sometimes technology lets us down, but hopefully we'll get the slides keeping up with the conversation today. So as you've heard from Sam, the objective of the project is to provide guidance that is internationally applicable and it can address known problems in NPO financial reporting. And for the project, we have 3 objectives for developing the guidance. The first is concerned with improving the quality, transparency, and credibility of financial reports from non-profit organizations with international high-quality guidance that is relevant no matter where you are in the world. The second objective is about providing information that is useful to users of financial reports for accountability and decision-making, and in doing so, balancing the needs of users with preparers. And the final objective is around addressing the accounting issues that are specific to non-profit organizations, and that's to help promote comparability. All of the proposals that we will develop for the guidance will be made with reference to these objectives, so they will be enduring throughout the project. So where do we start? The consultation paper has been produced to develop the conversation about financial reporting for non-profit organizations. It's to engage with you and others across the world about what is needed to improve financial reporting for the sector globally. And we know that the consultation paper includes a lot of information, but the main elements are in part 1, that looks at the general reporting issues, and in part 2, which covers the specific accounting issues. And part 1 of the consultation paper is divided into 5 chapters. And in our meeting today, we will be touching all of these chapters. These chapters focus on which types of organization we think will benefit from the guidance, who are the users of the information, and what is important to these users, because at the heart of standard setting are the needs of users and producing information that is relevant and of common interest to them. And that is what we're considering in this MPO context. We will also look at the two core premises behind the development of the guidance that are set out in Chapter 3. We will then consider the final two chapters that look at the extent to which current international standards meet the needs of non-profit organisations and the model we propose to use for non-profits that leverage both international and national standards. The consultation on all of these chapters closes on the 30th of July of this year. Turning to part two of the consultation paper looks at MPO specific accounting issues. And in our final session of the meeting today, we will look at whether we've captured all of the issues and how we are prioritising these for inclusion in the first set of guidance. The issues identified to date cover all aspects of financial reporting, including revenue, expenses, assets, as well as the presentation and disclosure of information. And we will be holding further outreach sessions later in the year to discuss each of the proposed topics, and we'll look at these individually. So to give sufficient time to consider all of the topics, the consultation on the topics in part two will close on the 24th of September of this year. So that's broadly what's in the consultation paper. So now we're going to turn to our first topic area. And in this area, we're going to look at the definition of MPOs, as well as identifying stakeholders and their needs, and also the premises that sit behind the consultation paper. Firstly, I should explain that we're using the term non-profit organisations in this project, and we're using it to cover a range of entities. But we recognise that in different parts of the world, people are familiar with different terms. And these could be terms such as NGOs, charities, membership organisations, charitable trust. But the inclusion of organisations such as churches, universities and hospitals goes to show the sheer diversity of the sector. And so we have come up with the term non-profits to cover all of these generically. And because of this diversity, we don't believe that in providing internationally applicable guidance, that we can have a single definition that is going to cover all of the organisations that might benefit from the guidance. So in the consultation paper, we propose that non-profit organisations are defined by reference to four broad characteristics. The characteristics approach that we are proposing means that an organisation might be an MPO if it meets any combination of the four criteria that are shown on this slide and are included in the consultation paper. Three of these characteristics are concerned with organisations working for social benefit rather than producing a return for investors. And these characteristics include delivering services for public benefit, surpluses or profits being used to deliver services for public benefit, together with assets not being held for social benefit. And these kind of characterize organisations that are not operating to generate financial returns, but to deliver for the public benefit. In addition, we've included a characteristic about voluntary funding, which can be significant for many MPOs. And the existence of voluntary funding may be important to distinguish non-profit organisations from governments, with governments often, our governments working for social benefit, but what funds them don't generally come from voluntary donations. So that's the four characteristics we're using for defining MPOs. And I should add here that we recognise that definitions of non-profit organisations do already exist internationally, but we don't believe that these meet the needs of financial reporting purposes. for example, the statistical framework, there is a statistical framework that is used internationally, and it has a definition of non-profits that doesn't recognize that some entities do produce profits, but that these profits are used for public benefits. And as you'll see from the slide, there are what are called market bodies, those operating for profit, that we would consider to be non-profit organizations for financial reporting purposes. So our definitions are slightly different, and what we need doesn't quite fit with the widely used statistical framework, although many of the underpinning characteristics are the same. So let's now turn to stakeholders and their needs. The consultation paper proposes 4 main stakeholder groups. It proposes service users. Those are the individuals or organizations that benefit from the work of non-profit organizations. Then there are resource providers, those that provide funds and assets. Those could be donors making voluntary contributions, but it also could be financial institutions who are providing loans or other resources. The third group are regulators. They set the requirements for non-profit organizations, so a really important stakeholder group. And then society at large. This is important because members of the public, even if they don't use services themselves, trust that non-profit organizations are working in the best interests of their communities of which they are a part. So they are very important for this. The consultation paper also proposes 4 main areas of interest for stakeholders, which capture their needs as users of financial information. These are whether a non-profit organization is meeting its objectives. Is it delivering what it said it would do? Is it doing so in a way that maximizes economy, efficiency, and effectiveness? Are they making good use of the resources that are being provided to them? And are they doing it in a way that complies with restrictions and regulations? And this could include restrictions about how particular assets or donations can be used. And finally, is it operating with regard to the longer term health of the organizations? In other words, are its operations sustainable in the longer term, which is really important in terms of providing services? And we think that when these needs are met, they can support accountability to a full range of stakeholders to support them in their decision making and accountability. And it should be noted that these needs are not focused on any one stakeholder or group of stakeholders, but on the general needs of all of the stakeholder groups that we are proposing exist. So we'll now turn to chapter 3 of the consultation paper, which focuses on the 2 premises that we're proposing underpin the guidance. And we see this as essential to meeting stakeholder information needs and the guidance objectives. The first premise is that the guidance will be accrual based. And the chapter notes that the type of financial reporting carried out in jurisdictions will depend on a number of factors. This includes the requirements of the local financial reporting guidance, the legal form of an entity, and the influence that donors have over the financial reporting of an entity. And the consultation paper looks at 3 bases of preparing accounts. It looks at cash, modified cash, and accrual. And for clarity, by cash, we mean that economic events and transactions are recognized when cash is received or paid, and assets and liabilities are not recognized. By modified cash, we mean that some economic events and transactions are recognized on a cash basis, but others are recognized on an accrual basis. And this means that some assets and liabilities may be recognized. And then finally, by accrual, we mean that economics and events and transactions are recognized when the event occurs. And that means that assets and liabilities are recognized. And in this chapter, we compare the advantages and disadvantages of each of these bases in terms of how they meet the guidance objectives that I spoke about at the beginning. And the analysis acknowledges possible challenges around existing knowledge and capability to use accrual-based standards, and also the potential for complexity that it might introduce. It also acknowledges that donors may require cash-based information or information that is not fully accrual-based. But the chapter explains that accrual-based accounting is internationally recognized as the best basis to achieve a comprehensive view of an organization's financial performance and position. It improves quality and transparency of financial reports and enhances accountability and decision-making. And for those reasons, we are recommending that the guidance is developed on an accrual basis. The second premise of the guidance is that it should include non-financial reporting in its scope. Arguably, non-financial reporting is more important for non-profit organizations than it is for other types of entity, as it provides an opportunity to explain more about what the organization is delivering that wouldn't be found in the financial statements themselves. So non-financial reporting might include areas such as an entity's nature, what's the purpose of the organizations, its objectives, and its forward strategy. It could also include risks and how it's faring in terms of regulatory compliance. Of course, non-financial reporting can also be used to demonstrate the impact that an organization is making through its projects and programs and the benefits that it's generating from the wider activities that it's undertaking. So non-financial reporting can provide context to financial information. It can provide additional information about an organization's activities that is useful to meet broader information needs of stakeholders. So I've now introduced the topics that are in chapters 1 to 3 of the consultation paper. And we're now going to move into our first set of breakout sessions. But before we do that, let me just explain how that's going to work. When we move into breakout groups, you'll be automatically allocated to a room, and that assignment will be random. Please remember your room number in case you get disconnected, as that will enable us to then put you back into your group. We're also asking for 1 or 2 people from each group to provide feedback on behalf of the group. And we ask that you decide this from amongst yourselves. We have assigned a moderator to each group. Their role is to encourage you to contribute, keep you focused on your question, probe the reasons for your views. So they're there to help the functioning of the group. And then they're not there to be the spokesperson. In terms of protocol, please put your hand up if you would like to contribute, and the moderator will call you in. And please try to avoid talking over each other. If your moderator disappears for any reason, we'd ask that the last person speaking call in the next person. Please share your views and the reasons for your views. The members of the group want to hear this. If you have any members of our advisory groups or country champions in your groups, they'll be expressing their own views and not the views of the project. The questions will be shown in the chat, and we would ask if you could put your camera on whilst you're in the breakout groups, because it just helps the flow of dialogue. The breakout group discussions will be recorded for the benefit of the project team, but will not be published. So please be open and frank in your input to the group. The main session is being recorded and will be published. So that will be when we're back into a plenary session. So here are the questions for the breakout groups that we have. Question 1 is about who are the main stakeholder groups for NPOs in your jurisdiction and what are the non-financial reporting requirements. Question 2 is about how accrual accounting might improve accountability and about the accountability arrangements in your jurisdiction. And question 3 is about the accounting basis for NPOs and about how NPOs are defined. So as I said, you will be automatically now assigned into breakout groups over the next few seconds. Please make the most of your time in your group, and you'll have about 30 minutes to discuss amongst yourselves. So I encourage you to have frank discussions, and I look forward to seeing you in about 30 minutes time. Thank you very much and welcome back, everybody. We have you all back here. Sorry for bringing you back slightly early. We just had a slight technical hitch, but we got you back and sent you back into your rooms again. And I certainly heard from the expression of a couple of people came back that there was still more to talk about. So hopefully you found the time very useful. So what I'd like to do now is kind of hear the sort of the top issues that were being discussed in each of your rooms in response to the questions that we posed. And if I can I start with you, Sarah, if you can introduce the question that your group looked at and who's going to speak on behalf of the group.
Hi, Karen. I think it might be me, but Malene might talk. So we had two questions. Who are the key stakeholders for NPOs in your jurisdiction? How do these align with the groups outlined in the IFRR for NPO consultation paper? What information needs are common to these stakeholders? What requirements currently exist in your jurisdictions for non-financial information reporting? What are the advantages and disadvantages of existing non-financial information reporting requirements? I think it's me. Malene might add some commentaries in as well. So if I've missed anything, you might fill in. We had 3 regions, Turkey, Russia and Georgia. I think what one was particularly Abdul Hadi is in it works with Syria as well, so it's cross territory that we're talking about. Magdalena commented that there were key stakeholders with the organization themselves, institutional donors, the community, and donor individual projects. That was talking about the Islamic community. In Russia, one of the first things that was said were the Russian Federation was the main stakeholder was government, interestingly, but also individuals, donors, company donors as well, and various stakeholders from that perspective. So I'm just checking through my notes. And then in Turkey, the domestic, the government again, local authorities. There was separation of the domestic users, and which is government and local authorities, and then there's a donor community, which we're looking at the financial information. So that answered the who were the donors question, or who were the key stakeholders. In terms of non-financial information, for some of the regions, there were no special non-financial information reporting. That information sometimes was in things like donor reports, but not necessarily in year-end financial reports. In Turkey, that's to be developed, but that's not ready yet. That is in sort of planning stages, but we don't have non-financial information and specific reporting requirements yet. And then Olga provided me with lots of information in the chat box about something called GRI, which is based on international consultation, general reporting information, which is just generally narrative reporting type things, but looks at sustainability, social responsibility, and corporate governance. So that's been developed as a part of stakeholder consultation to assist companies in preparing that information. And I think that's covered everything. We spent some time